and welcome to Building a Better South Africa Together, brought to you by Anglo American in partnership with Y. Now, young people are the driving force to building a better South Africa. Historically, this is what we've always done, and this is what we will continue to do. The real question is, how do we begin to start to build a better South Africa? Well, one thing I love about young South Africans is how we are able to find unconventional solutions to some of the issues that we are facing in the country. Joining me on the show today is Editor-in-Chief at Mail and Guardian, Ron Darby, and of course your favorite content creator, Zimasa Vabazawho, here to give us a better understanding of how young South Africans are taking charge right now. Hello, you two.
Hello,
welcome to the show. So happy to have you here. So Ron, I'm going to start with you. One of the biggest initiatives at the Mail and Guardian is the 200 Young South Africans list, right? Through this initiative, have you found that young people are the driving force in tackling some of the major issues that we're facing here in the country?
Yeah, and that's the whole purpose of the Young 200, right? To highlight, I think it's been going on for like 18 years, 19 years next year. And it has been about highlighting the young people who are actually the ones that are changing the society we're in. I think South Africans almost suffer from a pessimism that nothing is changing, but fundamentally there are people, and they happen to be young, who are changing the story of South Africa. I think we should so in highlighting the best, young 200 in South Africa, it's about just letting us see that actually things are shifting on the ground, right? So I think maybe we all get obsessed by the headlines and the depressing headlines, but actually South Africa is changing, rather maybe not as fast as all of us would love it to change, but there are shifts, and I think the more we highlight them every year, and that's where it's going to come from, right? Not from old fogies that would have or worry about their pensions and the like, and wants steadiness and a lack of change. It's coming from that ground, and that's what the Young 200 is about. 18 to 35-year-olds that are doing stuff to kind of highlight that this country is dynamic. It is a dynamic country. South Africa isn't old and stale, and people would like us to believe that, South Africa, ayindawo, that kind of thing, we're stuck in it, right? So South Africa is moving, maybe in places that make us very uncomfortable, especially the older guard, those with entrenched interests who care about the value of, I suppose, their properties and the like. But South Africa is changing. TRP, we're about to find out.
We'll see when we get there. But
and there are positive changes. There are lots of positive changes that are happening.
But I also feel like when it comes to South Africa, there's an outsized pressure put on young people to basically be their own saviors. And I always find that to be weird, right? Because when you think about it, you inherit what you are given. Like, you eat what the other people cooked. So when we put an outsized pressure on young people to like be the agents of change, I get weird. I'm like, I technically can't change anything. Like, it's a literal thing. The only thing I can do is vote, right? That's the only thing. Other than that, the system plays how the system plays. They've seen that even through research that a lot more people start to become civic agents the older they get. They become a lot more conservative, and they start to realize what are the things that actually matter. What are the things that turn on things when I wake up? Why is it more expensive for the electricity? Why is it this thing? Why can't I get this type of loan? Why am I getting more interest rates? So the older the people get, or while still being considered youth, you find that they are in a position where a lot of pressure is being put on them, but they can't necessarily change the system other than maybe adding their voice to try to change the political environment in their country, right? So I think when the question is asked, like, what can young people do? It's like, right, should we not be creating actual parameters and spaces that young people can use as leverage to change the status quo?
Because we can only create the change that the country needs if we are given the platform to do that, 100%. If we're given the resources to do that, right? It doesn't come from nowhere. Zim, let's talk about your series. Here's something interesting. You are on social media. You're giving us all the facts that we need to know, interesting facts as well. Tell us a little bit more about where this kind of all started for you and what the purpose of this series is.
So I think for me, it was directed at the youth, right? And it was directed because I realized that we first got to get people to know what's happening. That's the first bit. Then they've got to either like or dislike what's happening. Then it moves them to action. So when you kind of think about it, there's a gap. And I mean, I was just before we started, I was teasing Ron and saying that alternative media came about because there was a gap that wasn't being filled by mainstream media. So people like myself found a way where we could take data-driven stories and tell them a little bit better, so that youth who now consume media through platforms like digital media can find a way to access information, but in a way that's palatable to them, that isn't framed or predicated on the old ways of doing things and serving media. So that's kind of where it started. I realized that there was a type of content that I could consume globally, but I couldn't consume it relative to South Africa.
Now, Ron, I was lucky enough and odd enough to be part of the this year's Young 200 South Africans. Thank you so much. I was one of the hosts.
You're great. You're amazing.
Thank you.
You're amazing.
Thank you.
You're really cool.
But it was incredible to see just how many people were part of the list, obviously 200, but also the different kinds of industries that they came from. Seeing that list and seeing these young South Africans make such a big impact, does that create hope for you?
It does, and it doesn't. So, like, when I was there, like, it was a grand event, and you were amazing, right? It was like,
thank you.
and seeing everyone dressed to the nines and excited about the possibility. I had a chance to speak to a few. They kind of cornered me into a little corner and said, okay, sure, Sibali, siyabonga, thanks for the event, thanks for the plaque they had. But the thing is, we need to make it go further. So here, I'm bringing all of you together, but the networks aren't being created. And that's the thing you're talking about, the platforms that need to be built on. It doesn't make it, once a year we have this event, it's cool. But what people are telling me is they want this regularly and be given a platform for their voices to be heard, and then shaping policy making, right? And that then, in essence, puts the pressure on policymakers.
Yes.
And then we will see things change towards youth issues, which ultimately, if this country is going to have a future, which I do believe in, it's focusing on youth and particularly women issues, right, going forward. And so there, one gripe with me was, okay, Ron's high-fiving me for the event, as I said, and it was all about, how does Young 200 become a platform that they can live and breathe every single day?
Yes.
And know that it's a window into youth issues that policymakers or decision makers can feed into and then change their business models or whatever the case may be. And that is what the onus then becomes on myself and media at large to create this vehicle that you almost can't ignore it until June 22nd when we have this event and all of us are there now, suits and clapping hands and talking about youth issues instead of acting about them and was reacting to the noise they are making, right, with regards to the country's problems. So that is the fine balancing act that we need to do as the Mail and Guardian and with our media partners. And it's taken another point, right? Traditional media, where I'm from, where the legacy media players, our problem is we've had our head in the sand. And just like been scared of all these changes that are coming and done nothing to change how we tell stories. So people like you, I learn from you, right? This is just like, okay, I'm going to copy you as much as you kind of leaned on my weaknesses, right, as established media. Similarly, we have to change how we go out and address youth issues.
Yeah,
we try, right? We're not as slick as you yet. But that's where we have to go if we're going to be relevant in going forward.
Yeah, I think that is a question that I was going to ask about old media versus new media. Is there still a very wide gap, and how can young people kind of take advantage of that gap? How can we, bring these two platforms together, get creative, and
I think
do something?
I think that's a very interesting question. So I think, as Ron would understand, the biggest push, I believe that for me, going forward into the future, AI will take breaking news. There will be no need for breaking news reporters. Where the fight for, I would say, perception and how people feel about a story, because the story is the story. The people who were there are the actors who were there, and then the story was told, right, based off the facts. But people want the opinion part of the story. And that's where I think it becomes to then separate. I don't think it will ever join, because what the world has given us through social media is the ability for every single voice to comment on a particular topic and to allow their opinion, their point of view to have the opportunity to go viral. So that's why you find that in certain instances, it might be a very obscure person from somewhere who says, guys, I'm actually seeing it like this. And everybody goes, you're actually right. And that person doesn't have a lot of followers, doesn't have, but this particular issue. So the democratization of news the opinion side of news has well and truly started, and it can't be stopped because everybody, and you can't put it back into the bottle.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the question then becomes, when we start to move on to things like more AI driven, more sort of, I would say, face recognition software, it starts to then say anybody can suddenly make the news. And then how do we as a society deal with that? Right?
Yeah.
Because there's checks and balances for people like for Ron and their organizations, but we're going to the Wild West. Anybody can create. That's a good and a bad thing. And then we as society and as the youth need to figure out what's good, what's not.
Exactly. Yeah. Ron, historically, young people have been at the forefront of change in South Africa, right? And we continue to do so as we move kind of into the future. But one of the major things is that we are taught to be resilient and we are taught to persevere. But Ron, sometimes I don't want to persevere.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get tired. We get tired only because things seem as though they're getting more and more difficult. Is there something that young people can look forward to going forward?
Yeah, like, I also don't like the idea. I mean, they internationally, they define South Africa as a resilient lot.
Yeah.
Right? So I was big as through all these
Yes.
things,
Mbogoto country.
Yeah.
A Mbogoto country.
Yeah, it's part of our definition. But I do think, like, look, we have a young populace. There are things that, like, look, there are shifts that need to happen. There are truths that we thought when 10, 15 years ago, okay, before AI, before this technology, the knowledge economy, get educated, get into financial services, get into this place, and you're fine as a young South African. More or less, all of us have been taught the same thing. But we know the knowledge economy is kind of scary right now, right?
Yeah.
AI, what it's going to do to all sectors where you have to have like a qualified degree. So there's a bit of murkiness there, and that's where everyone was saying South Africa is so far behind, we're never going to catch up in the knowledge economy. But I don't think that's an advantage to many other nations, because everyone's scared about this AI treatment and stuff like that. So. But what we do have, what the rest of the world doesn't have, and the continent as a whole, we have a young population.
Yeah.
And a young population is, by definition, is influential to culture and pop cultural changes. And you see it whether it comes through music. Globally, you see that the impact of African youth are having across everything, even how people are thinking and businesses are operating. So we have that advantage. The question is, how do we keep people almost incentivized and positive about the country? Because once you use the youth element and the youth get disenchanted, apathy, that's when you go haywire, and then we get stuck with our old politicians and old ideas, right? Yeah. But I do think just by active citizenry, if young South Africans step up and play their role within and make their voices heard, whether politically and just by where they buy, and that is where I think we'll morph. The market, the economy will change towards feeding those needs, right? If you are a Woolworths or any of these big South African corporates, and you're not looking at that market, which is ultimately your market, the youth, right? And catering to it and changing and how you address this market to make more profit margins, you're almost out on a ledge, right?
Yeah.
So as long as we have a platform for them, and as long as their needs and wants are listened to, over time, admittedly, this is the biggest area is the country will shift towards, and if it doesn't, I guess another risk politically to it. So I do think there's reasons to be hopeful in this country.
Yeah.
There's lots that is happening in this country. I want to qualify something that you said about on the media front. Anyway, I must protect. I'm coming here to speak on legacy media's behalf. There's opinion makers. Everyone can make an opinion, but checks and balances are needed, right?
No, 100%.
Yeah.
So, and it's because of this explosion of opinions is where we're so divided as a country, where I think there's still be room for checks and balances. So, and collaboration with people like him, for Wayne Guardian, and finding the right voices. When I have spoken to a few people, and you just find, okay, this opinion and where it comes from, maybe we don't entertain it, but we find the right voices and give them the platforms. So you can barge into my door tomorrow and say, Wayne Guardian needs to give me a platform, and I need to, as a representative of an old industry, needs to give him space. And if I don't give him space, that is what I'm doing. I'm detracting from what are the opportunities there for young minds like his.
Yeah. Zim, last question for you before we wrap up. I mean, your you're a content creator on social media. One of your biggest things is that you give young people information that you think that they would find interesting. Are young people hungry for information? And also, do we know what to do with that information?
I think the first question, yes, they are hungry for information. The numbers and the growth on my platforms has shown that. What I find to be disheartening at the moment is the gender split of who is consuming the content within the, I'd say, 18 to 35 demographic. And that's skewed towards male. And it shouldn't be that way. But again, it's the conversation to say the content is agender. It's not geared towards male or female, it's geared towards anybody, right? So that for me is my first sort of worry around the type of people or who are actually consuming the content, because I need the content to be consumed by everybody so that everybody starts to understand. That's one. The other thing, just adding towards Ron, is that the youth want to be prioritized, but they don't prioritize civic action.
Okay.
And this is something that we've got to make people aware of, right? The biggest voting bloc is youth. They're the biggest voting bloc. But do you know why political parties don't prioritize the youth? Because the youth don't prioritize civic duty. And if they don't, if you were a business, would you invest in a block of people that aren't going to give you the returns? They are not going to show up on election day. So if the youth want things to happen, there is a framework that's been created, right? That's civic duty. If you want to be, whether it's to compete to be a ward councillor, whether it's to, you're not going to change things, right? Because the old people have created their own institutions of how they move through I'd say civic spaces, right? Residents associations, etc. The youth need to start to create their own spaces that can actually say, no. To the Gogos, this is not how it's going to fly, right? To the Mkulus, this is not how it's going to fly. We actually want these things to happen in our community. And as the youth residents association in this area, we want things to go a particular way. And we have a say here because we also live here. So that's the one thing. And then the last thing I think is, do they know what to do with the information? I think not at the present moment, but this is where it creates another opportunity, right? Ron, I'm giving you this one for free. So this is what creates another opportunity. We've got to take information and the opportunities to the youth. Right? So how this institution of YFM was built. YFM, I think for its first maybe 3 years, it was never in studio. They had a studio, but they were never in studio. They were out there at the people. That's how you build a legacy brand. That's how you get civic movement and involvement. And that's what, if you want the youth to vote, you've got to be in their faces. You've got to create spaces that they feel safe in. And then you say, if you're hosting a registration weekend, why not host a picnic? Why not host a music picnic and say, come to this picnic, we've got the best artists, but you register to get in. You register to vote to get in. That's how you actually become dynamic and get the youth to become civic citizens who actually want to change the future of the country.
Exactly. And changing the future of the country is a group project.
Yes.
We all have to get involved. Okay, so Ron, before we wrap up, are there any final thoughts that you would like our viewers to
South Africans kind of sit navel gazing, right? And always think about our own problems, and that's why I think we get lost in it, right? But if you look at it, I like big picture thinking, right? That's why I am the job I am in. Globally, the world is old and grey. Literally everyone from Europe to Asia to the Americas, average age, China and America is 35. Africa is like 19, right? So Africa's 60% of us, I think, in the continent are 25 and below. So, and that influence, that is the growth market on all elements. We are going to influence politics, good or bad, this continent and to global issues, right? So that is great opportunity for me, right? I like to sit in this position than be in Europe or be in Japan, these aging places where ideas are stale and old. We have a chance to revolutionize how the world works going forward.
And that's exciting.
And it's us to grab the opportunity. So what you're saying, it only takes place if the youth get that and become engaged, active citizens. Because that's when the marketplace for ideas, we can influence the ideas that go forward into the next 10 years, 20 years. Whatever the issues are, climate change, women empowerment, and all the elements such that, but it does take some level of active engagement with the issues of the day.
Yeah.
And that is what we have to encourage in this country and ward against. Because, you know, the older people, maybe they're kind of happy at the fact that the youth aren't playing a role here.
Yeah.
Because then it ensures they continue their stay in power.
They get to
They get
vote.
comfortable,
They get to vote for their
peers.
money.
Yeah, and there's like basically there's a laundromat of old ideas and no new ideas into the system.
Yeah.
But as long as we get those ideas and into that system, then maybe. So yeah, I'm in Africa where we said, man, and even the political uncertainty it will cause, because young people are hot-headed. They're perfect. I've always liked Julius Malema since I followed him 20 odd years ago. Yeah, just for the noise he created.
Yeah.
The uncomfortable. He's uncomfortable.
Because we needed that.
Yeah. But we need more of Malemas.
Yeah.
It can't just be him alone, right?
Yeah.
He's becoming more or less a stale idea. So we need more of that energy coming against the and that actually will move us forward as a continent, I think. So I'm hopeful. I am like so positive about this country, and there are changes that I know as a guy in his 40s that'll be so uncomfortable going forward. But I have to be almost comfortable with that discomfort in order for us to move forward.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think from my perspective, Nia, it's more of I need more of the youth to know more about how the country works. Whether or not you know about everything else and your specialization, maybe you studied you're in the arts or you are in economics or you're in accounting. I need you to know how the country works. Like, how does it work? How is a bill done? How is a law done? How is I need more people to know that. When you start to know that, we then have an opportunity where the youth can understand when processes are not being followed one or two.
Yes.
You should go down the road and ask any youth and say, what's the PFMA? And they should know what the PFMA does, right? They should know that, oh, okay, cool. South Africa is spending X amount on health, on education, and those are the top line things, right? That even Ron speaks about, the top line things. I want every single South African to start to understand that, every single young South African. Then you're not going to be hoodwinked when it comes to things like, oh no, we are doing well in this sector. We're doing well in this ministry. You can then start to work out. For me, what I believe is going to save South Africa is going to be the professionalization of the state. Right? We do not have targets for the people that are in power. Whether it's us, right, who are going to come in, we need to go in with targets.
Preach them.
Professionalize the state as a start. The second thing we need to get really well is that the youth need to understand that nobody is going to change the world for you. We need to change it, right? And that means the only way you have is to vote. It literally is. Because when you vote as a bloc, you can then say, hey, you party that we voted for, we're not seeing our people represented in your party, therefore there's a problem, right? Then the last thing we've got to do really well, we've got to understand as young people that we're not going to do what our parents allowed our grandparents to do, which is to lead forever.
Yeah.
We are going to take over. We're not going to wait until our parents who are in their 50s and early 60s to now be the ones to say, I think I'm ready to serve. No. We're going in. We're the ones that are going to inherit your mess. We're the ones that are owing 70,000 Rand per person based off the South Africa's debt. Everyone in this room, in this country owes 70,000+ Rand. This is a problem. Every single department of government overspends. Every single one. And this needs to stop. Professionalize the state.
Because where are we supposed to get the money?
100%.
To pay that 70,000 Rand?
We are going to pay for it.
Where? How?
Yes.
We are going to pay for it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Zim. Thank you so much, Ron, for joining me on the show today. Very, very interesting conversation and a lot of things that we can take away from this conversation. One of them being that we actually really have to work together to build a better South Africa. We need to stop focusing on the Twitter fingers and just being angry on social media without actually going out. Or is it, what is it? X now. X now. And being mad on social media, we actually need to go out there and make the change. And I really hope that you were inspired to start the change today and to start building a better South Africa together. Let's meet again on next week's episode. I'll see you then. Bye.